Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial IO. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm welcoming Chris Nelson, co-founder and principal engineer at Launch Scout. And I'm excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
I usually like to start these off with like a little background of like where you come from and what you do.
Sure. Man, I've been doing software development for a very, very long time. I think I've been doing Elixir for probably 10 years now. I think some of our early Elixir code goes back to like 2015 and stuff. So it's been a minute.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Launch Scout started under a different name, and like a lot of folks, we were doing Ruby on Rails when we started back like 2009 or something like that. And then the mid 2010s or before, we kind of saw large Ruby on Rails projects hit like certain bottlenecks where they do things like, I remember Groupon, which was like this huge successful Rails project at the time. They said like, okay, we're going to like do this microservices thing and rewrite everything because we can't do the scaling. And so that led us to look around for like, okay, what's going to come after Ruby on Rails? And at first we decided it was going to be Clojure, but then one of our developers was really excited about Elixir. And like he sort of organically pulled us in like one at a time, because it was just like, we'd see it and we'd be like, oh man, this is like really fun. And like, I already know how to do everything here. The syntax is so similar, and Phoenix is so easy to pick up if you've done Rails, that it was just like, it was easy and fun. And like, it just caught on naturally. And we've been sort of like gradually adopting it for more and more things over time. And I would say like for several years now, it's been our default choice. Anytime we get to choose for a stack to use for custom development, it's Elixir, and it's been great.
Nice. I love that. I feel like it's a great choice just to, especially for like consultancies, you can have less engineers and you can pretty much, I'm guessing like most of your backends are always just going to be Elixir, because usually customers don't care too much about that unless they come in with a tech heavy person. But
yeah, that's true. For the companies or for the clients that don't have an opinion in advance, it's a great choice. The other thing that's been huge is like before live view, even our early Elixir projects, we were doing like, we used to have this, we called it Rule Zero. And it was like at the beginning of the project, just choose which JavaScript framework you're going to use, because you're going to have one. And so we would, and what we, when we were originally doing Rails, we were like so fast at building custom web apps. And then when the whole, JavaScript framework train came along, we got so much slower for building the same apps that it was just like really terrible. I'm going to take off my sweatshirt. Give me like 1 second if you could. Sorry.
all the excitement about talking about Elixir,
Yeah. This room just got like really warm as soon as I closed the door. So, oh well. When we started working with, I think it was Backbone and then React, like everybody expected to build these lovely, spa-like experiences, of course, but the fact that it costs twice as long now, or it took twice as long to build an app, like they just hate it. Of course, right? Who wouldn't? And then when live view became mature, all of a sudden we got like back to the levels of productivity we used to have with Rails, but we could still give them this amazing experience. I mean, that's been such a huge win for us, because like the rest of the industry is still like, yeah, of course you're going to do React. And, that's, I mean, I think there's still a lot of Elixir shops that are like still doing like React front ends and things. But that's been a huge competitive advantage as far as like moving really fast.
Yeah, I mean, if you can use live view and just keep everything tied together, I feel like you can get so much done with one or two devs. It's amazing. It's almost magic.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So the main topic that we're going to be talking about today, and I've been kind of obsessing with this and talking to a lot of engineers that I know. And last week, why am I blanking?
Because you're old, like me.
Dude, for real, I have to write everything down now, and it's pathetic.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel. I blanked on your name, but I had Daniel on last week, and he was talking about his development experience and how he is using Windsurf and Claude and like how he's tying things together. And so I've been talking to a lot of people about this, and I feel like maybe your business partner, one of you posted about how AI workflows are just exponentially just making you guys so much more productive at Launch Scout. And
yeah, that was Tim, I'm sure. But yeah,
Tim, yeah, that's who it was. Yep.
Yeah, that's been like really, really fascinating. And like, what's the Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times. And it's actually like a curse, and like, this is where we are, like, right? We are absolutely in solidly interesting times.
It is. We see people vibe coding, and then we see smart engineers actually leveraging AI in like really good ways to just make their workflows more productive instead of just blindly trusting outputs, right? So I'm curious because you're a consultancy, so you see a lot of projects. So I feel like, workflows need to be dialed in to just make you guys productive and, able to be just more profitable, right?
Right. And, I would say like at the beginning of this year, we were all pretty much solidly in the AI skeptic camp. Like, frankly, we all pretty much had the same experience of like trying out, well, it was GitHub Copilot, sorry to pick on it, but like we all had the same experience where like occasionally it would generate something brilliant, but the rest of the time it would generate so much noise that it was like, I'm spending more time reading the garbage than I am getting anything useful out of it. And so we just turn it back off. And sometime, it feels like around January, we got exposed through a client that was leaning into to Cursor pretty heavily, and specifically with the Claude 3.5 model. It like tipped just past the line from it's most garbage to it's mostly useful. Like there's this weird tipping point where it's like, it's not that it didn't generate noise and you get frustrated. It was that it all of a sudden became worth the effort to use it, because the amount of time it could actually do something useful was significantly higher. The other thing that I think was that made the tipping point possible was when Cursor added the agent mode, and it could run the tests and use the tests to fix its own hallucinations. For me, I think that was the moment it was like, okay, this is actually a useful tool. instead of just like a cool shiny toy. And then you could take it on actual real projects and go like, okay, I need you to build this feature, and you need to write tests for it, and you need to make those tests pass. And still not great. Like I've seen a lot of like, okay, if you just set up the best cursor rules file, you can get it to follow a good process and it will do great things. And the reality is like, kinda. I haven't had like the thing that we've seen with LLMs is finding like the perfect workflow. It's really, really hard because like, I wish there was a more emphatic word for non-deterministic, because that doesn't do it justice. The amount of crazy variability that you get from these tools is frankly like it's hard to get my mind around, because like it will constantly be like amazing, it'll like this morning Tim showed me this he basically vibe coded a membrane WebRTC Elixir podcast recording app last night just because he was annoyed with what was out there. And so it will do things like that sometimes.
Wait, did it actually compile and work?
Not only did it compile and work, like he showed it to me, and it had like, you could start talking, and it had like a lovely like equalizer visualization.
Wow.
It would record and play back. I hadn't pushed the code, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. But it was like completely amazing.
What is Tim's background? Is he a developer or?
Oh yeah. Tim's also like an extremely experienced Elixir developer. Like
okay. So it wasn't like someone who didn't know what they were doing.
No, not at all. Not at all. So he was like guiding it, but the fact that he didn't handwrite any of that code.
Okay. And that's impressive.
Yeah. And that's like amazing, but but you have to keep it, the thing that hurts my brain is like, it will do that. But then the next day I'll go like, please move this field over here. And it'll be like, I think I'm going to delete half the form for you instead. It'll just like fail at the simplest thing. And that happened. That's like routine. So it's like so unbelievably unpredictable that it's really hard to know, like, you'll get used to it working well, and then you'll start to like trust it, and then it'll bite you so hard. Yeah. And then you'll be like, okay, well, I need to trust it with little tiny things. And then you'll forget that like, well, it can sometimes be successful with like unbelievably big chunks. Yeah. So like embracing the variability, I think, is like one of the bigger challenges, because if you can embrace the variability, all you have to do is like, if you have a long enough window, like a couple of weeks, the law of averages kicks in, and then you get a win, even though like you've seen it fall on its face on simple things on Tuesday, and then succeed at something amazing on Thursday. Yeah. If you can average it out and like embrace the crazy town, then you can be successful.
One of my coworkers has been playing with like the agent workflow stuff using, and I started adopting this, and it does seem to work pretty well. He'll create like markdown files with like a prompt and checklists, right? And then like notes that, Claude has learned, and it constantly has it like return back to that markdown file to keep track of its progress, and then also put notes about the project that it's learning when it makes mistakes. And I feel like it's a really solid way to approach problem solving.
Yeah. We have a couple of our developers that have like taken that approach and been successful with it. I'm probably a little bit less structured than that in terms of how I work with it. So yeah, I don't know if that I can personally speak to the times that I've tried the like, okay, generate a markdown of exactly how you plan to approach this problem, and then like started a new session, and I'll use that as the prompt. Okay, here's the document for what our plan is. Just do step one and show me how it goes. So I tried that approach on like a kind of decent sized feature. I was like taking a code base where I'd started it, and it was time to convert all the fields to ecto money because they were, integers or floats or stupid, um, and it, even with the markdown prompt approach, it failed pretty hard. And I had to just get back to like, okay, I'm going to take the steering wheel and do a little bit of it, and then I'll just basically prompt you to do the next little tiny
So you like to prompt in like small bites, but you're manually kind of prompting and guiding.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The best, I don't know. I think obviously everybody's figuring this out together, and it's so new. But I think there's still going to be a lot of like an individual is going to have to find what works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I find far and away the most important is to keep it on track as far as like writing and running tests. If I can get it to do that, the chance of it being successful and productive is a lot higher. And the other thing is like, once you have those in place, like insisting that the first code that it writes, which is almost always going to be like pretty nasty.
Yes, yeah.
But you can tell it like, yeah, that's not cool. Doing an ecto change set get field in the view template, like, no, you can't do that. That's not cool. And you can give it a little prompt, and it'll clean it up in fairly decent ways at this point. And that's so recent. Like I saw a big jump just between 3.5 and 3.7 thinking in terms of the models, the Claude models. Like
Mm-hmm.
it made a jump from like I could give it a refactoring suggestion and it would do something good, versus before that it would do something different,
Yeah.
But it would be silly in a different way.
Do you find Claude to be the best model for Elixir at least?
Yeah, and I would say that's probably like not just Elixir. I've tried it for other things, which is also fascinating. I don't know if you've tried these tools across languages, but we have, and it's been really fascinating. I think one of the things that made me an AI skeptic, it's all fear, of course, but I had fears that both like, oh man, am I going to be replaced entirely? And of course, like that's not really realistic. But the other fear that
At least not yet, right?
not yet. And unless AGI were to become a thing, I don't, it's really hard for me to ever envision a time where people who have our skills in terms of really knowing how to build software well aren't going to have a useful and vital way to contribute. You know what I mean?
I'm curious, not to like completely sidetrack, we'll get back. How
That's
do
all
you
good.
feel like, I think I am super lucky to have like 10 years under my belt before AI has stepped in, because it made me go through a lot of hard learning curves where you're forced to learn things, go a little deeper than you would. Like, how do you think it's going to affect people learning now and junior developers, like actually grasping the harder subjects?
Yeah, that is a great question. And for years and years, when the market was really strong, one of our core things was our apprenticeship program that we had. And we've taken like, 25, 30 developers over the 5 years we were running the program, and like taking them from like brand new to like productive
I love
developers.
that. That's awesome.
And that was like my favorite thing that probably I've ever done in my career. I loved it very much. And I don't think it's just the AI. In fact, I know it's not, but like when, when the interest rates went up and dried up all the VC money, like we saw the developer market do what it did. And the market for like bringing in new talent has like gone to zero, and that's been really painful. And I think the AI has contributed also to like the market for new junior developers is like super difficult right now. And one of my fears is like, you know, AI is making us senior developers wildly more productive, and that's awesome and it's good. And like, we got to get on board with that for sure. But like, does that, you know, if we have no way to bring junior developers into the field, like where do people think senior developers are come from, you know?
Well, that's always been my big thing. Like you see all these job postings out there and they only want seniors, only want seniors. When like
Yeah.
I get it from like a company standpoint, but if we don't mentor juniors and new developers by seniors, we're going to run out of senior devs.
Yeah, like mentoring's important. It's almost like it's in the
Yeah.
name of your podcast or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said that like bringing on people and mentoring them and doing that was like probably your favorite thing. My
Yeah.
YouTube channel by far is one of my favorite things to do. Is
Yeah.
just because like even if I'm burned out and I don't feel like making videos, you get like one comment that is like, "Thank you so much for this," and it like
Yeah.
makes it all worth it, you know?
Yeah. But back to your question though about like how does this change people who, how does it change the experience of people who are just learning the code? And it's a really great question. I think one of the struggles that I have also as an experienced developer is when the AI is successfully writing the code for you, it's so hard to keep the critical thinking part of your brain engaged enough. Even when you know that you're supposed to, even when you're trying, it's so easy to like, read something kind of half-ass and not realize that like, oh, there's this like subtle bug here that you didn't catch. And so like as a new developer, like how much harder is it to like really achieve the level of understanding that you have to be, a senior level
Yeah.
developer, right?
I
And I
compare
don't
it
know what
to
happens.
Yeah, I compare it to like PR fatigue. If you're doing too long of
Yeah.
PR or too many PRs, you start to not give it critical
Hmm.
thought and you scan
Hmm.
code versus actually read the code.
Yeah.
And
Plus
you,
plus one.
yeah, yeah. And I'm so guilty of PR fatigue.
Oh,
Like
I know.
I'll catch myself and be like, I have to come back to this because
Yeah.
I'm starting to not read it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, yeah, that's a struggle for us, and how much more so it is for a new developer who's at the early end of their career. I don't know yet. But the other side of it is like it's also really good at explaining code and telling you what it's doing. Um, it will lie and make stuff up though sometimes, but I think it's getting better at that. I think it's getting more accurate over time. So I feel like having it help you by explaining the code that it's doing, um, but you still have to combine it with like, okay, and now I got to test what it told me and make sure that it's
Yeah.
actually telling me the truth.
I've used it to explain some macros to me that I've like dug around. I always have trouble reading macros when they're written
Sure.
by other people.
Hmm.
Like I even struggle when I write my own sometimes if I go back to them. But
Oh
like
yeah.
it's amazing at like breaking down code and explaining things to you. You do the explain it to me like I'm 5
Yeah.
and
Nice.
you're good to go.
Yeah. 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 Um, but yeah, so it's like a double-edged sword. Yeah, we haven't figured out like what the right cadence is to implement it, but like I think what we probably need to do is have some amount of like forced, you know, Thursday's no AI code help day,
Hmm.
like I think there's probably some level of like you have to like force yourself to keep those skills up somehow. Like right now, it's not a problem because like Cursor struggles hard enough, or probably whatever tool you're using. It'll have like such good days and bad days that occasionally just be like, okay, time to hand code today. And
Yeah.
so like we get enough reps that way just because the thing's so unpredictable. But I think it's eventually going to be the case as they smooth things out that I think we're going to have to find, as a company, but probably as a community, like how do we make sure that we're, forcing ourselves to keep the skills up. But yeah, I don't know what yeah, for me, I found that like having a day where it's like, oh, it's not working today, time to go back to code is actually kind of refreshing and fun because it's like, yeah, I actually like writing code.
Yeah.
It can, when it's too successful for too much of the time, it can feel like I'm just like, yeah, I'm just doing PR reviews all the time now, and that's my job, and that's not really all that
Well,
fun.
like honestly, like
It's fun, but
with
it's not.
with my day job, like the code base is so large, it's hard to leverage it. Like obviously I can have it work on small pieces, but I'll usually have it like I'll write a module and then have it make unit tests for me. But
Hmm.
like for the most part, it's hard to have it write too much code because normally I'm bouncing all over the project to track down bugs and other actions that I don't know how to do it with, at least like cursor or anything. I feel like it's quite difficult for it to get like a full grasp of how things are connected and work. But
Yeah, yeah,
one thing that impressed me, I have like a little small side project that I putz around with. It's like a Chrome extension and like basic like web scraping. And
mm,
I wrote it all in just vanilla JavaScript. And I was like, okay, I want to turn this into a Svelte project. And I don't know
mhm.
anything about Svelte. Like I know
Right,
basics, right?
right.
And so I wrote up a little markdown file explaining the steps, and I wanted it to look at, specific files one at a time and rewrite them into Svelte components. It did phenomenally well. Like I had to do some hand holding and like corrections, but overall I'm pretty impressed by it.
Yeah, yeah. It's great at that kind of thing a lot of the time. Like doing a lot of the grunt work to convert, you know, a decent sized code base from one thing to another.
Hmm.
A lot of times it'll do a great job at. Um, yeah, we've also found like it's really great if you have an example to give it to. Like,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, if you just tell it to do the thing and it hasn't seen the thing before, especially if it's something like kind of inherently confusing for humans, it will really struggle. Like one of the things that I've notoriously seen it fail at is with live view when you're doing like kind of like a what is it, inputs for with like ecto change set and the like drop params and like sort params, that whole business of like you're having like multiple of a thing in a nested form.
Hmm.
um it's just a little, I mean, I don't want to I don't want to cast shade or anything, but it is the way it works right now. Live view, I don't think is super intuitive. I don't think anybody would say
Right.
that it is. It's just kind of like you just kind of got to learn how it works, and then like once you learn how it works really great, and it's super easy to
Hmm.
build forms like that. But like, man, telling Claude to do it if it hadn't seen it before, it would just like generate so much
Yeah.
nonsense. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
But as soon as you hand coded one, you could say like, do it like this, and then it'd be like great.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things with unit tests. I'll like give it an example of a unit test that is basically the same thing for a different module, and then it copies it, mocks data the same way, sets up and tears down the same way,
Yeah.
and it's really nice. And 90% of the time I'd say the test coverage is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty good at that. And yeah, it can almost, we've talked about like, okay, it's good at like writing lots of tests.
Hmm.
Um, I have found that like if I'm not careful, it'll write so many tests that like even just reading and maintaining all that test code is like that's a that's a thing that
Yeah.
isn't free, right? And so like making sure I go back and have it refactor the test code so that it's, as easy to understand and look at and not overly duplicated.
Yeah, you got to be careful
Is
too
worth
that
it.
it doesn't just write a test to make it pass too. I've had that where
Oh, sure.
like, no, we don't want to like it'll always want to correct the condition. Like if I found a bug or something that I'm trying to fix, I'll always write a test to prove that the bug exists. And
Yep.
it so badly wants to just fix the test to work with the bug instead of
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
on. So I just had to stop it and then go find the code and fix it myself.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it do the opposite where it'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to change the implementation of the thing to be wrong to make the test
Make
pass.
the test pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I think
funny.
I'll just like, I was fighting with it like an hour ago over that. Yeah.
So are there specific tools that you are using on a daily basis that you also have your other developers use, or is it kind of like you kind of are learning from each other and you have your own workflows going, or do you have a company wide thing yet?
I would say organically, we're definitely kind of all on the Cursor with 3.7 thinking train at this point. We're definitely kind of trying out the workflow of, first produce a plan and don't write any code and generate a document and then, go step by step. Like that whole approach, I think we're still trying out and figuring out what works internally. We're small enough shop though that like we tend to just all get on the same Discord channel and organically spread knowledge that way rather than like we're not far enough along that we have like an official launch scout way to do it yet.
Yeah.
And that's not really how we work anyway. We're very much like an organic learn from each other kind of shop.
Yeah, it's always best. And I feel like I'm impressed by the open dialogue that you see just around AI and like workflows versus people being like, I don't need AI, and then they secretly are using it. Because I think it benefits everyone to like approach tool sets properly. Like for a long time, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever because it doesn't work well for just writing code, especially if you're using it wrong. But like I would say, as you kind of implement strategies with like markdown files or like real config files and things like that, you can kind of dial it in to work nicely. And I found myself, I'm using Cursor a lot. I did start messing around with Klein, which is a VS Code extension, but I would say they're very similar. They work the same way. They have the agent workflows where they can kind of iterate over their own mistakes, which is cool.
Yeah.
And I love when you can see it run the tests and be like, oh, this test passed or failed. Now it goes back and tries to fix it. And I love that little loop. Yeah.
Yeah. That was literally to be cliche, that was the game changer for me. It's like, okay, when I saw it do that, then I was like, yeah, I could see myself using this thing and actually being productive. It was that moment.
Yeah, because I was like just singly prompting things and not using anything properly, and you're just like trying to do that same thing but manually, and it just ends up being very frustrating.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, those were the first, I think, the first attempts I had were like, please build this application for me. And even when it could, with that approach, it would fail so quickly after that it was just like, clearly not a net positive at all. It really took the, when it could actually do some at least mimicry of test-driven development that it became interesting.
Do you think it's taking away productivity from developers at all right now? Like, do you find yourself trying to battle prompts versus just writing code? And then you're like, what am I doing? I know how to do this.
I mean, I think it's within the last couple months where I've seen it go across the net positive line.
Okay.
I think it was previously to about January, it was even though it could occasionally do amazing work, my experience with what it was that it was a net negative developer for sure.
Yeah.
And so it didn't matter. Even though it could occasionally do brilliant things, if it's overall net negative, then you shouldn't use it, right?
Right. Yep.
I think it was with the agent mode and TDD, and specifically it was for me, it was Cursor and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I saw it go from we have actually done some measurement, and I'll get to that in a second. But my subjective experience was this is a net positive developer, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet, it felt like I was pairing with a very enthusiastic apprentice that was kind of average. They might be okay.
Yeah.
And then with 3.7 thinking, the subjective experience for me became like I'm pairing with an apprentice who's new but actually fairly high potential. And, that felt different. And so I think we probably had some discussion before this podcast about the experiments that we've been running. But after kind of that subjective, this feels like a win, we decided to do some pretty intentional experiments. And one of them that we did is with an existing client that was interested in this stuff as well. He found us a project where, there is off the shelf software to do this thing that he wants to do. It's a manufacturing company. And right now I'm managing all this stuff myself. He's managing all this stuff himself in the spreadsheet. Let's build an application to manage this process for us. And it's a non-trivial but not huge application. And so we took a 2-week time box of me and a front-end designer, and she wasn't even full-time, and this 2-week time box, and can we build this whole working system and put it in production? And we were able to do that. And we leaned on Cursor as much as we could, but we're not trying to specifically constrain ourselves to not handwriting code. It was basically just use the thing. When it goes off the rails, just step in and, write hand code, of course. And what we observed at the end of it, we when we estimate projects, we tend to just count cards. Everybody has their own thing, but what we find is if we just try to break things down into about the same size stories and just count them up, that's as accurate as we can get, really.
Yeah.
And we typically have, for our typical teams, on most projects, we kind of guess that with the cards that we come up with when we're at the very beginning of a project, those will grow and change over time. But if we kind of guess that we can do about 4 or 5 a week, that's about as accurate as we can get. When we got to the end of this project, we had shipped 40 cards in those 2 weeks.
Dang.
So it was roughly 4x in terms of the productivity gain that we got.
And how many people were involved in the 2-week, that was single project?
Me and a designer part-time.
So you were the full-time developer?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, Martin Fowler writes about you can't measure developer productivity, and I completely agree with him. I agree with him about most things. But it's still, even though it's not perfect data, I don't think it's worthless either. Because, we use this process to guess in terms of estimating projects, and it's usually, we're pretty decent at it. We usually come in, we're usually able to to pick a decent sized budget and hit it over time
That's
fairly
awesome.
well.
That's a very hard skill to have. For a
Yeah,
while, I was running a consultancy, and it's very difficult.
yeah, yeah. And I would say like that's, I think live views really made a material difference in terms of us getting better at that than we used
Mhm.
to be. Like before, when we were doing things where we had a whole front end stack and a whole back end stack, I feel like
Yeah.
our estimates were much worse.
The
And
more projects that you
yeah,
have, or the more different frameworks involved, it just, yeah, it complicates everything.
yeah, yeah,
And the more code bases you have, because like whenever you
that's what
start
it is.
having apps and things, it's just a multiplier, right? Like if you're
Yes.
making a native iOS app, or even if you're doing like React Native for both Android and Apple, it's another code base. It slows you down.
Oh yeah, yeah. And sometimes you legitimately need that, and
Right.
that's just is what it is. But
Yeah.
yes, when we're able to build a web app with live view, we've also had pretty good success with like just doing a thin native wrapper around live view apps, which I don't hear people talking about too much, but we have like a couple like apps in app stores that take that approach, and
Oh, that
it
is
actually
cool.
works. Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
you got to write a blog post or something about it.
Probably so. You're probably right. But yeah, one of our apps has been in production a couple years that way, and
That's
it
awesome.
actually
Very
works out.
cool. I like
So
that.
anyway, yeah, yeah,
Is that usually the route you go? Like if you're not, if there's like, there's very, it's rarely needed that you need like the top features of an iPhone or Android phone,
yeah,
right? Most of the time you just need a PWA with some notifications.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's what we've done when we can get away with it, and it's works.
Brian
Brian
Cardarella.
Cardarella,
I
yeah,
always butcher his name. He
yeah.
says hi. He's in the comments. He's listening.
Oh, nice. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Brian is an awesome dude.
Yep,
I always enjoy having him on too. But
absolutely.
yeah, the wrapper idea is cool. I would like to see some blog posts. I rarely do front end developing, and when I do, I AI is pretty good at design work and doing
Oh
some
yeah,
front end stuff. So
yeah.
I'll
That's
usually
the
do
other thing
that.
that was. Yeah, that was the other thing actually with this project that I didn't have a chance to talk about. That was really awesome. So before that, I'd done like a couple other like smaller experiments where it was like just me and Cursor, and so like it could do a user interface, and it can definitely, you know, do Tailwind stuff and make it look okay.
Hmm.
But it's not the same as having like the same way that like it can write code and it's okay. Having an actual like a designer with like, you know, at least my level of coding skill, but on the design side on that
Right.
project. And then she was also leveraging Cursor to do what would have been grunt work for her.
Hmm.
Having that combination was really amazing because we also had like the level of high quality UI polish that we expect on our projects as part of this whole deal. And that was really really cool too. And the other thing that we did as we went along is like um, our designers tend to start with like hand sketches a lot of the time with like,
Hmm.
okay, let's just do a sketch of what this screen should look like. We were able to like start with like the nonsense that I came up with as a developer. She would hand draw like, hey, let's like make the screen. This would be a lot better if we made the screen look like this. We could just like take a picture of that sketch and tell Cursor like, please reorganize the screen to look like this, and it would like do it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's impressive. I will
yeah,
I like from the design aspect. I don't think you'll like the same with developers. You can't replace
no, it's
talent
not
like
about
because
that. Nope.
you can't replace like the way UX works, right? And I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like you
it's
still need
yeah.
people for creating good UX, especially with like mobile apps and like I'm talking strictly from like just like a landing page design where I have
Mhm.
zero skill. It can do pretty good, but As far
Yes.
as like user experience, across, like moving a mobile app or even a web application that's a little more complicated than a
Oh
landing
yeah.
page, I don't think it's there.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's like you're. It's never going to replace. Well, I don't know about. I do not yet envision a scenario where it can replace experienced people, and that's not like, if you look back at the history of innovations like this, that's not what happens anyway. It just like it makes us radically more productive.
Right.
And
Like it'll
as
allow
developers, it
us.
will do that. As designers, it does that too. And that was really cool to see.
Yeah, the way I like to look at it is I feel like you can have like a very large scale product application with like two or three people with really good skill sets from like maybe
Yeah.
like UX field, engineering field, and then marketing and sales.
Yeah.
And I think you can scale a lot with that team of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we think so as well. And that's sort of the next thing we're trying to figure out is like, okay, what does this change about like custom software development generally? Like if we can, if we can be like an order of magnitude more productive in terms of how fast we ship high quality software, what does that unlock in terms of like there's lots of uh, organizations who could benefit from custom software development that definitely could not have afforded it before.
Mhm.
And like, what does it unlock in terms of like a potential market that could benefit but couldn't have afforded it? And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot out there. We think that there's a lot of opportunity out there.
I think we have to just
It's going to
prepare
change what we
ourselves.
do. Yeah.
We have to prepare ourselves to be annoyed by this vibe coding trend, though. I think that's gonna drive us nuts for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was talking at the beginning of the podcast about like, you know, vibe coding apps. Like that's a thing you can do as an experienced developer, and it's kind of fun. But yeah, it's not like a real way to build to
Yeah,
build anything.
last week
It's fun.
I busted out my aviators, and now they're my vibe coding glasses.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it can be fun, and it would be fun to mess around. Like, I can't remember who it was now, but they reached out and they were joking, but like it would also be kind of fun. They're like, "What are we going to build on a live stream? Just vibe coding." And I think it'd be
Oh yeah,
fun.
yeah.
It would be a
Yeah.
fun little way to mess
How
around. Like, get like 4 Elixir developers on a live stream, and we can build a project together, push to Git, and like
yeah.
actually produce something.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna steal from Tim. Like at the very beginning of all of this, he like introduced Cursor to me as like, what if we like essentially approached it? This was before vibe coding the term was coined, but he said like coding with Cursor as improv comedy is how he put it. Like, what if we approached it as like, okay, we're going to like work with somebody and take their idea and feed it to Cursor and see what happens. And it's probably just going to be hilarious. We're not going to
That would.
expect anything useful to come out at all. If it does, like, hey, that's great. But if not, like, we're just going to have a good time. And like, I think if you approach it that way, it is kind of fun and interesting. And yeah, I think the whole like improv comedy aspect of it is interesting.
Andre in the comments said, "Sign me up." Like, I think it'd be fun. Well, we should
Yeah.
we should pull Brian in. You could do it, Daniel, and we can vibe code.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think so too.
Make we can let Claude come up with the project too, and like just start completely from scratch on the stream.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it could be fun.
It would be fun. And then just like strictly live view and keep it at least simple into like one tech stack and then
Yeah.
see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, if we can have a working production, obviously not production, but if we can have a project that compiles and does something in like 2 hours or less, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can like do a decent job, like, especially with something like Fly, it'll like deploy okay too. Like,
Yeah, there we
yeah.
go.
No, I've told it like, okay, now it's time to write a GitHub action for this thing and run all the tests and deploy to Fly, and it'll be like, cool, I got you.
We deploy it to Fly, and then whoever was watching our stream, they see like a vulnerability, and we immediately get hacked.
Sure. Sure.
But it would be fun. It would be fun.
Yeah.
I see all these tweets out there of like people building SaaS products and things, and then they're like, "Yeah, I vibe coded all of this," and then you'll see that they get like hacked or attacked, like DDoSed, whatever it may be.
Oh yeah.
And I'm always wondering, do you think they're all real, or do you think most of them are like satire? Because you never know on X. I feel like people love to troll.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't tried to investigate any of the things. It seems really plausible that at least some portion of the time, especially if you're just like, if you're not afraid to throw away multiple attempts, you could absolutely vibe code a SaaS product. And if you weren't capable of reading what it had produced, I'm sure it would have all sorts of like garbage code and security vulnerabilities.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It seems like completely plausible, but like both seem plausible to me. Yes, you could actually probably get it to build an actual thing.
Yeah, and get it deployed and collect money, like, which is wildly scary to me.
I think it's plausible.
Yeah.
To use Mythbusters, I think I would declare that myth plausible.
Plausible.
Yeah. I can't confirm it myself until I run an experiment, but it sounds plausible.
Yeah, it does. I agree. But
It goes back to like, it's really disturbingly easy to turn your brain off when you're using one of these LLMs. And that's the default. Like, it's much harder to keep your brain on than it is for it to turn off. And so that's why it's like, yeah, critical to do all the practices that help us be successful as developers now become even more essential. And I think so that's my favorite thing about this whole experience is like, I came in being really afraid, like the things that I value about software development wouldn't matter anymore. And what I found is like, they're even more important.
I was going to say it matters even more.
It matters even more. And the two things for me were like test-driven development, which is still the best way I know how to build software. And the other thing was language choice. I was like, okay, well, it's just not going to matter because the LLM can write everything. So I guess we're going to all write Python or something now. It does an okay job with Python. But what's interesting is like languages that are really, really productive for us as developers are also productive for the LLM for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Elixir having, first of all, a approachable, intuitive syntax means the LLM can guess and be right more of the time. And the other thing, I haven't tested this well enough, so it's still just a hypothesis, but I really kind of believe that like functional programming is better for us humans because it eliminates so much of the context that's like outside of, like, we can't see, you know.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I've said this so much too.
It's like, constrained to just like, okay, I know this function, like what comes in and what comes out is all there is. And
no global state to be messed with. And also, like, I feel like I've said this over and over, like if I learned on a functional immutable language, I think I would have picked up the skill of programming much faster.
We've got a chance to actually try that in real life, and it's been really, really cool because like our latest generation of apprentices, multiple of them have just come into Elixir as their like first production language.
That's wild. That's cool.
Yeah, they've been really successful at it, and it's been really cool because Elixir has this reputation of like it's for experienced developers only or something. I don't think so. I think it's
Yeah.
great for new developers.
Yeah, I agree. And I just always tell people stay away from the shiny objects until you actually understand what you're doing, like
Yeah.
gen servers and,
Yeah. Right.
supervisors. Like, yeah, sure, use Phoenix and LiveView, let them use it under the hood the right way. But if you start using gen servers too soon, you're going to just introduce like global state problems and have the same race conditions we have in object oriented languages.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see that video? It's really, really old now, but the OOP library that there's a video of somebody writing, like, it's a joke, but like they write this whole object-oriented programming library in Elixir and like use it behind the scenes as like macros and gen servers and stuff, but they like add more and more features as they go along to the point where they have like multiple inheritance. And it's just like
That's funny.
ridiculous and silly.
I have not seen that. Do you know what it's
Okay.
called?
I'll go find it.
Okay.
I think it's just like, I think the library is just OOP, but yeah,
That's
I'll find it and
hilarious.
drop it.
Okay, cool.
It's a
Yeah,
great
that sounds funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember just, I will like my first language was pretty much like Objective C and Java.
Yeah.
And then I moved into Swift when it came out. And that's what like made me actually really enjoy programming. I think that was the first syntax I really enjoyed writing. But like so many things with object-oriented programming that just like it makes it hard to like, if you have like an engineering mind, you're already used to breaking things down. And I feel like doing all these magical objects and mutability complicates so much that you don't really realize.
Yeah. I actually, I did object-oriented programming for a long time. And, in college I guess there was some C++, but like Java was just brand new when I was coming into the field. So I actually really enjoyed coding in Java for a lot of years and got to the point where I felt like I was really good at object-oriented design.
You're the only person I've ever met that said they liked Java.
I mean, so before I was writing Java, I was trying to build web apps in Perl. And if you do that, you might find that Java is actually an improvement.
That's funny.
There are actually things worse than Java in the world. So anyway, I liked Java. I actually, I did a lot of Java, talked at Java conferences and things.
Nice.
And then I switched to Ruby, which I really, really loved. And of course, it is an object-oriented language. And I struggled initially to transition to functional programming, even though like people were talking about it a lot. I had lots of really smart people that I trusted suggesting that like it was the way forward. But it didn't quite click in my mind because I kept thinking like, okay, well, an actual application does have state, like otherwise it can't do anything, right? Like state is a thing that exists, and like my brain couldn't figure out like where it went. But when I saw Elixir and I saw OTP, even though in reality you don't want to use gen servers that much, the fact that they were there all of a sudden like made it okay, because I knew where the state could go. It like got me over the hump to like actually like dig in hard enough to get good at functional programming somehow.
It's like a containerized version of state,
Yeah. There was something about it where it's like, as soon as I understood where state would go when I needed it, then everything else, started to make sense to me. So,
yeah. Well, and like I feel like I was writing Elixir for a year before I even started using gen servers and like a real project that I was building, and I just didn't. I'm glad I didn't dive into it because I didn't have a need until I had a need, and then I figured it out.
I did the opposite of that. So I came to Elixir like first. I was like, I was intrigued by it, and I think I was like talking about Elixir and like evangelizing Elixir before I was writing that much production code. So I was like writing gen servers for conference talks and things like that before like I was actually, and this was like, it had to be before 2015, like pretty early on. I remember giving a talk at the O'Reilly open source convention about how Elixir and OTP like more correctly implemented the original vision for object-oriented program. Like if you go back to like Alan Kay and the original ideas that became OOP, it was all about like message passing. And so if you look at OTP under the covers, it's all about like tiny things that, just pass messages and no global mutable state. And so anyway, I was like talking about it and like getting those ideas out and writing gen servers way before like I started writing real Phoenix apps in production and things where you don't really need that many gen servers.
It is more fun. Like when you write your first gen server and it clicks, you're like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then when you start like doing dynamic gen servers and dynamic supervisors, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like I recently, like within like a couple months ago, made like a really small like Peggle game server. Like it was just a very small like Peggle style game, drop the ball, hits pegs on the way down. But it's like multiplayer where high score wins, and it was cool. So I made like a gen server for the game state, and then each player got their own like user state gen server, and it was fun. It was really fun, like spinning that up and playing with it. Cause like, I was like, I have a reason to use gen servers and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, they're fun. And then, message passing and just, and then like, if you're an observer, I had a live view where we created a little UI of like profile heads that would like move like a race depending on their score. So it was a fun project.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like we had a list of things that we could, because I feel like AI, I think we hit it, but I feel like there's a lot that, where is that? I had a list of topics that you suggested, and now I just have to find it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Your WebAssembly components and stuff. That's a fun subject.
I think so. WebAssembly is a really interesting space. And like for years, it's been cool, and you can like do great things with it. I mean, obviously you look at things like Figma and, Adobe and those guys, and, taking these huge C++ code bases and implementing them in the browser, and, you can do great things with it. But it's really pretty low level if you look into WebAssembly itself. So like WebAssembly, the initial versions of it, basically are constrained to, if you're calling into a WebAssembly function, basically the types that you can pass are pretty much like numbers and vectors of numbers, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And if you do want to do anything more interesting than that, you also can like have a patch of shared memory that both the caller and the callee can interact with. And that's fine. But if it means you want to do something as simple as like hello world in classic WebAssembly, you're like, okay, here's this offset to memory, and okay, we should figure out what encoding we want to use. It's like incredibly, like ridiculously low level to do anything at all. And with WebAssembly components, this came out of the work really on the server side of WebAssembly. There's something called the WebAssembly system interface. which was basically like, if I want to write server-side WebAssembly, one of the things I need is like, how do I get to the surrounding environment? And essentially, like, early versions of WASI were basically like kind of similar to POSIX in terms of like a low-level C API for interacting with like file systems and networks and things like that. And that community realized that like what we really need is like a high level way for WebAssembly modules and WebAssembly, to interact with its surrounding environment. And WebAssembly components are a layer over top of what they call core WebAssembly modules, or like the original, low-level WebAssembly modules that bring to WebAssembly a high-level language agnostic type system. And so basically now you can have interaction between a environment that's kind of hosting a WebAssembly module and a language that's implementing the WebAssembly module, and they can interact in much more high level expressive types. So you can pass in, the kind of types that you would expect, but you can pass them across the language boundary. So it's really kind of makes WebAssembly way more practical than it used to be. And so what I've been working on lately is implementing the WebAssembly component spec in a library called WASMX, which is an Elixir library that wraps WASM time, which is one of the more prominent WebAssembly runtimes. But it's really interesting in terms of like, if you're say building and hosting a SaaS platform in Elixir, and you want to let users be able to customize what's going on in your system. Right now, the way that we do that is, okay, well, you can have a webhook that it calls out to, and maybe an API that, like, if you're a customer, you can call back. But with WebAssembly components, your customers can now provide you written in whatever language that you'd like, with high level types. They could provide you like code that you can safely execute inside of your own platform, because WebAssembly, the other thing that it gives you is like it's secure sandbox, zero privilege by default. And so, I don't know, like the example that I've been kind of playing around with is like, let's say you're like an e-commerce platform and you'd like your customers to be able to write their own discount logic. Well, now you can like define a high level interface for what an order looks like, and the customer could write in any language that they want, C#, Go, Python, JavaScript, whatever. They can basically just write a function which conforms to the discount calculator interface, compile it into a WebAssembly component, and just like upload it onto your platform. And that like that code can't do anything in terms of like talking to the file system or the network. All it can do is like return the value that you say that you want. And, you can use that as, what you would have had to do with like webhooks and API calls and asynchronous stuff calling back and forth. You can now just like do that in a much easier, high level, inline way, so that like discount logic can execute like right when the order's being computed, rather than having this whole asynchronous back and forth. So
okay,
that's, I don't know. It's hard to like talk through all this without like looking through code examples. So I hope some of that
Yeah.
made sense. But that's the reason that I've been excited about WebAssembly components and being able to interact with them from Elixir. And
No, yeah,
that's what I was talking about in Barcelona.
yeah, that's really cool because it basically doesn't it prevent us from interact like WebAssembly is vastly widely used, and then it doesn't restrict us to like our own DSLs or anything like that.
Oh
You can
yeah.
kind of bundle
Yeah.
it up and make it work with any platform at that point.
Yeah. 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 I think it will let us do things like, the whole effort with Python X to bring Python into Elixir is awesome. I'm more excited about like, well, what if we could do that with anything?
Mm.
What if we could just like run, what if we could leverage a library from Rust just as easily, or from Go or from C#? And that's the other promise of WebAssembly components that get me excited.
Yeah. Now I have the GitHub repository pulled up, and I've never done anything with WebAssembly, or NIFs for that. But when you start writing like Rust and like compile, like when you write like a NIF, are you compiling Rust like directly in the project at that point, or how does that work?
So let me clarify the question a little bit. If you're
Okay, yeah.
talking about using Rust and Elixir together, let's talk about the scenario where we're using WebAssembly components. At that point, what you would do is like for your Rust, you'd have a target that would be like, the right, I think it's like WASM P2 or something. It's a specific target where you say, I want to compile this Rust code into a WebAssembly component
Okay.
WASM module. And so it's not a NIF at all.
Oh, okay.
It's a WASM file. It's a binary file. It's a WebAssembly binary file that is no native code at all.
Okay.
And then WASMX, basically what WASMX can do is it can load that WebAssembly component as its own process. And then from Elixir, you're just like communicating with it, and it's a supervisor. You're just like calling into it. The other thing that it will do is like you can, it's got macros so that essentially you can spin up a gen server that gives you like a high level Elixir module to interact with. That's kind of that is implemented by that WebAssembly component.
That's okay. That's really cool. That's really cool.
So yeah, it's just an Elixir process. It's supervised as part of your supervision tree, or it can be, and to you, it just looks like Elixir.
And then how is handling? How does it handle like failures and crashes and things like that? Like,
it will. This is actually what I did. So I'll hopefully I don't know, it might take a few more days for my video from Barcelona to be online, but that's what I actually was demoing in Barcelona.
Oh, cool.
So this conference was just a WebAssembly conference. And the talk was about like supervising your WebAssembly components with Elixir. And so I was introducing that community to OTP and supervision and how all of it works. And so WebAssembly components, when you call in and let's say like what I did is I wrote some JavaScript that just like raises an exception if you call it with a certain parameter. And so you can see like in the console, the process will just crash because like it'll hit that line and give you a WebAssembly garbage error. But the process itself, it'll just get supervised. It'll just like get restarted like any other.
However your strategy is set, it'll do whatever. Yeah. That's really cool. You'll have to, if it's not out already, make sure you share that video link with me, and I'll make sure to add it to the show notes for people too. Because that's really cool.
I think OTP is such a great thing, and I don't think like the rest of the world really knows enough about how awesome OTP is.
Well, I feel like once you like understand how to use supervisors and just
Yeah.
everything from that point, like it's just so powerful. Like,
Yeah. No, I was literally having the conversation where somebody was referencing like the Armstrong quote about like any sufficiently complicated distributed system is going to have like half of a bug ridden implementation of Erlang in it. And yeah, I think there's some truth to that.
for sure. Yep. Yeah. Like I have a like an introductory course that I'm like trickle releasing on YouTube right now. And my favorite sections by far are the ones that are just coming out right now. It's just like OTP. So,
Yeah.
from agents, tasks, gen servers, and then supervisors. And I think they're just like, once you kind of like start to grasp the power you have with
Yeah.
just being able to spin up processes to do all these different things, and one crashing and failing doesn't affect anything else. Like,
Yeah.
and then node clustering is also really cool, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
so yeah, I think like we're really lucky because you can learn Elixir and not really understand anything about the Beam VM. But then when you start slowly getting more and more into the Erlang side of things, you're pretty much unstoppable, I think. I think it's the perfect back end technology you can choose for any project.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to like accidentally build very resilient systems without
Yeah.
you just by kind of following the golden path of of OTP. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have
I
to do extra
accidentally
stuff.
built a scalable product. Sorry,
Yeah.
guys. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think and I'm sure I've talked about this before, so sorry, listeners,
Mhm.
but I think the problem with a lot of startups too is they pick the popular choice versus the best choice.
Mhm.
And if like you don't have to worry about scaling and being like distributed systems when you only have a couple thousand users at the start, right? But once you start having, a couple million records in your database, and then you start having, you start getting closer to like 50,000, 100,000 users, you start running into really interesting problems that you can really
Yeah.
only scale with money because you're just spinning up more and more servers
Yeah.
to run your application, when I think the efficiency behind like an Elixir backend
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, we do Elixir, but we also still have some Rails projects going on as well. And a colleague of mine was relaying a conversation they were having where, that they have a startup in production that's running Rails and they're doing just fine. And so you know, they were talking to somebody on the VC tech advisor side, and this person was like from a big enterprise company, and they were like questioning the choice of Rails, and they were advocating like, well, when you hit scalability, what are you going to do? You should have started with microservices and done this whole like, microservices, Lambda, whatever approach. And the answer to that was correctly like, I've tried that approach. The problem is like I can build the perfect microservices thing, but that time I'm done, like it's taken so long to build it, or I've built slightly the wrong thing and I can't evolve it quick enough that like I never get those millions of customers because like I never got the product far enough along with the money I have to be any good. With Rails, I can build the thing and get it into production. And then
Mm-hmm.
maybe if I'm lucky, I'll have like the scale to hit those kind of problems. But the advantage we have with Elixir is we can build every bit as fast as we can in Rails, but we're never going to hit those scalability walls. We're going to be able to scale at least as well as like the microservices kids, but like
Yeah.
we're also going to be able to go just as fast. And I
Well,
think
no
that,
one discusses the black hole of microservices too. You get so tightly coupled, and then your AWS's little bitch.
yeah, yeah.
Uh-oh. We might have we might have lost you slightly.
Oh, am I still here?
Oh, you're back. I
Check
think,
it.
I think just a little bit of lag hit. But yeah,
Gotcha.
you end up getting so tightly coupled, and then it's hard to leave. And that's another thing, right? Like even if you have a lot of money coming in, if most of your profit is going towards your microservices and servers, that sucks too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Now, one project I'm really curious that I haven't played around with at all. Have you ever checked out like Flame or
I haven't had a chance to try it out yet. It looks really, really interesting, and I've definitely like, kind of been following it, but no, I haven't
Mhm.
had a chance to use
Yeah,
that in
it's
production
same.
yet.
It's like on my list of things to check out too, because I think like the concept is so cool because it
Yeah.
kind of gives you the microservice Lambda power, right? But you still are keeping everything under your control.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And like when projects start to scale and get big enough, it is sometimes you do have to consider breaking things up into other projects if you have like heavily used services for specific pieces too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we've gotten some pretty decent sized code bases. We haven't like had found it necessary to do the whole like, umbrella thing or not. I don't know
Hmm.
where you guys land with that, but that's another,
Yeah.
interesting approach. What do we do when our code bases get large enough?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I've never experienced it either. I've always been on like small startup teams where you don't have to worry about a lot of those things. But then like at my current position, at Collects, we have like 300,000 active daily users, and we have like billions of records in our database, and you start running
Nice.
into where pieces of your project are so heavily trafficked, you kind of have to like the topic came up where we had to like consider breaking things up so we can scale pieces of our backend differently than low traffic areas. And it's
Yeah.
cool, like I've never experienced it, so it's like cool to be in a position where I'm learning this stuff.
Yeah. 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 That also makes me think of things like, OTP features that I feel like are really, really amazing, but I've never heard of anybody use in production, like hot code reloading to like
Mm,
actually transition state between one version of an application, migrate the in-memory state of a process from one version to another. I
yeah.
remember first learning about that and being like amazed, but I haven't actually needed that. And I'm always curious, like to hear from people who are doing that in production for real.
Yeah, I'm not super involved in the deployment process, but yeah, one of these days.
For sure.
It's but when you go from, I don't know, it's just such a rude awakening when you have to worry about like how many database queries you have and the performance of them and all the like the low level stuff that you don't have to think about when you only have 1,000 users.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, that's the other thing that I always like, the bottlenecks that you actually hit for real are never like, you know, the Elixir code is too slow. It's always like that Postgres query sucks,
Yeah, yeah, it's your Postgres
Yeah,
or like your database pool or
yeah,
like it's always something. But like, and
yeah,
then as you scale one part, you break another part, and then yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's never like, okay, we actually need, well, for us at least, I don't think it's ever been like, you know, Elixir's too slow and now we need more servers because we have so much
Right.
traffic.
Yeah, it's rare, right? When you like, are you usually the maintainer of your projects too when you build them, or do you usually hand them off?
It's a mix of both. We we have clients where like we're continuing to maintain an application that we built. Actually, we have an application that we still work on in production now, that we maintain from 2015. Believe an
That's
Elixir
awesome.
application. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
which is pretty awesome. I mean, it's not huge at all, but it hums along and makes money. And so, this company will come back to us when they need us. But a lot of times they don't, which is really, really cool because Elixir is such a rock solid application that like it's not
Yeah.
like it needs day-to-day care and feeding.
Yeah, I have a really small like project from my consultancy days where I mean I still like work on it because I think it's really cool, but I built like a basically a web hosting service. So
Hmm.
like hosts multiple projects inside of a Phoenix app. And it's really cool. And I have like dynamic routing and like all this cool stuff. That thing is just up and running. I'll check in on it out of paranoia and
Yeah.
everything's just cooking along.
Yeah, we've had that too, where it's like applications that we'll put in production and kind of forget about, and they'll just be like running along years later because
Yeah.
like if something crashed, it just got restarted by the supervisor, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
But I love that.
Yeah, and we have other applications like to your question that we started and then put in production for them, and then it was successful enough that they would grow and hire their own teams to take it
Oh,
over.
nice. That's very
And
cool. And
yeah,
you want to see that too. Like that's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Yeah, I still check in with like an application that I um, built for them back in 2020, where it's they're kind of like Uber for package delivery. I don't think they'd mind me sharing the name Freight, Frayt. And so we helped them build the initial version of it in Elixir. And it was like replacing a no code platform that they were using before that.
Okay.
And yeah, they went to production on a no code platform to figure out like, yeah, there's actually a market for what they were doing. But then they like hit some scalability bottlenecks on that thing. And so we helped them build the system on Elixir,
Nice.
and it was kind of wild because like the front end they had like existing mobile apps um, in React Native calling in using a GraphQL API, and so we kept those things entirely the same and just like replaced with an Elixir backend, and there was no other way to do it but like on a weekend we just basically cut over the thing where we like turned off the no code side, brought up the Elixir side, and things kept working.
That's
It was
that's
like
always the
pretty
most
amazing.
nerve-wracking part, right?
I know, I was like there's no way this is ever going to possibly work, but
You just ripped out the engine and it just worked when you replaced it.
we replaced the engines flying through the air. It was
That's awesome. Very
freaking
cool.
amazing. And so they are still humming along in production with their own team a few years later, and I still check in with them. And
Very cool.
most importantly, they're still really happy that we guided them towards Elixir because it was the right choice. And
Yeah.
I always point to them as like, there's also this myth that Elixir developers are going to be hard to hire, and they've hired their own team and they've had no
Awesome.
trouble.
Yeah. I feel like there's a big need for Elixir jobs. Everyone wants one,
There
you
is.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
people want to do Elixir. That's what we see.
Yep. So we can start to wrap this up. We've been going on for a while, but what is your least favorite tech stack to go back to and maintain that you've built that isn't bad building new, but it sucks to go back to?
This specifically stinks to go back to.
Yeah. Do you have, or inheriting code bases? Is there any like specific tech that is inherently worse than the other?
I mean, like, I many years ago, I did some PHP work just because I wanted to see what all the hype was about, and I
I
would
love that you said
never do
PHP.
that. I,
Yeah.
like, it's one of the only tech stack languages where I really have trouble like seeing like what is the actual legitimate good way to use this thing. Like there are other
I've turned
technologies.
down projects with PHP. I won't do it.
Yeah. There are other technologies where it's like you just don't want to use it for the wrong thing. Like, for instance, I mean, I've written some Rust here lately, especially as part of the WASMX project. I've written a fair amount of Rust, and it's just not as productive a language as Elixir, but for doing certain things, it's still like, it's a systems language, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing systems programming, it's a good choice. If you're doing high level business applications, it's just not the right choice for that.
Right.
I feel the same way about Go. You know, people are using it for business applications. I just wouldn't. But if I was doing a CLI or a network utility, yeah, it might be a decent choice for that. Whereas with PHP, I could find no decent choice for it other than there's a lot of PHP out there.
There is a lot of PHP out there. I always will make fun of it. And I actually have a buddy that's a PHP developer. And I was just like, dude, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's like a banking app. There's a lot of like,
there's a ton
corporate,
of code out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of corporate projects on PHP, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do occasionally hear from people that like are, you know, people I respect that like, oh, there are some decent, you know, PHP stacks that aren't terrible to work in, but my experience was just, it wasn't a good time.
Yeah. I've never like, I mean, like I've dabbled with like messing around with the language. I've never built a project with it. So I'm strictly just hating on it from inexperience.
From afar.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, this was a lot of fun, and I'd love to have you back on sometime. Thank you for doing this with me. Yeah. And everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. This has been a fun conversation. And I think it's always good to hear how people are leveraging AI on the daily basis now, because I do think it's one of those things where it'll only make our lives a little easier as long as you know what it's giving you. Otherwise, it'll.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's not coming for our jobs. It's coming to make our jobs better.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really think that's the way to look at it. It can make us, used properly, it can make us wildly more productive, and that's a lot of fun. It's just like, you gotta keep an eye on it and always be like, prepare to be surprised.
I love that. Yeah. Prepare to be surprised. I think that's a perfect note to end on. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend. And thanks again for joining us, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Testing.